Alright, howdy folks, welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to Regiments, or more specifically, the Regiments Roadmap status update for August 2023. And to my surprise, the opening line really kind of shocked me, saying that Regiments released a year plus ago already, which doesn't feel like it's been a year, but yeah, it's been a year and a week specifically as of today as I'm making this video on the 23rd. Today, we're going to talk about some of the new stuff coming to the game, and we're going to talk about nations and custom operations, as well as heli-borne infantry. Now here they say that the northern group of forces, as part of their previous roadmap, or I guess their older initial roadmap, the Dutch are almost done, and they're hopefully going to be coming out sometime in autumn of this year. I'll have a picture of the old roadmap, which shows the Northern Group of Forces DLC, which the Dutch were a part of, as well as the Polish and the UK, and those heli-borne infantry. This was, I think, supposed to be a paid DLC, but it ended up being a free DLC, so a huge shout out to the developer of Regiments for giving that away for free. The Central Group of Forces with France, Canada, Czechoslovakia, as well as custom operations, and we'll dive into that a little bit later on, is most likely going to be paid, but I feel like people at this point, I myself have had a whole bunch of hours in Regiments, and if that means I get to pay like $10 to $15 at most for 3 new factions and a bunch of custom operations, I'm very happy to support a developer with that. Now, first of all, we have a little picture here of an M13 CNV and a Leopard 2A4 of the Royal Netherlands Army, as well as what could be 2 F-16s, which would match what the Dutch have, the Dutch military have. But a little bit later on, we'll talk about those aircraft, so keep those in the back of your mind. Now, first of all, something that I see a lot of people do, and I myself am, I guess, guilty of this as well, is when I don't know if I'm going to like a game on Steam, and it doesn't have an official demo, I'll pay for the game and then just keep track of my hours in the game, because you can always refund games as long as you stay within that 2-hour period. Now, the developer says he thinks that 2 hours isn't enough time for a game like Regiments, and he's going to be putting out an actual demo, and it wouldn't surprise me if that's going to include, like, say, the very first operation, or maybe some skirmish stuff, or maybe both. Obviously, the contents of the demo aren't very known at this point, but it's interesting. And I thought for anyone who's been like, yeah, is this game something I'm going to enjoy or not? It is sitting at like an 85-ish% after 1,800 reviews. But hey, check out the demo. It's going to be free. You won't even have to put in the, initial purchase and then try to get your money back through Steam refunds. So furthermore, we're going to talk about some nations. Obviously, we've already mentioned the Netherlands, and they are most likely going to be coming out in autumn. And we have this, obviously, preview picture. If you've played Wargame Red Dragon with the Dutch DLC, you kind of know what to expect. But furthermore, the final DLC, the Central Group of Forces, is going to have Czechoslovakia and France, as well as Canada. It looks like Czechoslovakia and France are done, with Canada now being the final one that has to be done. And here we have a OT-62B mechanized squad following an OT-65 scout car, and they are armed with these recoilless rifles, which we're going to see a lot of on Czechoslovakian vehicles. Initially, the plan, and this has kind of happened thus far, is that every time a nation was released, they would have a couple of operations. And operations are, I think, the mainstay of Regiments. Like, the skirmish game mode is very basic. I think it's very vanilla. The operations game mode, where you go to war and you have to make up your own units and decide which ones to upgrade, decide which ones not to upgrade, have permanent losses, progressive battles. And I guess it just turns out that, if you add 3 nations, you're gonna need 6, if not 8 or 9 new operations. And he's saying, like, it's just become kind of difficult. But instead of not having these operations, which I think would be a huge part of the DLC, and I should mention here again that the next one, the French, Canadian, Czechoslovakian one, will be a paid one, he's saying that he wants to make a different sort of mechanic for these operations, where they're going to use procedural generation. Basically, you select a regiment, you set up the starting conditions, the length, difficulty, optional rules, and just as like with the regular operations, you're going to fight through multiple stages, each with a randomly selected mission template, map, opposing force, and event cards. And just like in your regular operations, you're going to be able to incrementally upgrade your regiment to meet the arising challenges. So understandably, these operations aren't going to have a real story. I think thus far the operations that were released always sort of tied in due to the other operations in the game. However, it's saying that this will actually expand replayability and give you a ton of customization options. And I think that if this will be part of the paid DLC, I'd feel a little weird about that. But at the same time, if that means that not only you get to now try out the, the French, Canadian, and Czechoslovakian units in operations, but this also goes for the Dutch, the English, the Polish, the other nations already in the game. So we're looking at like West and East Germany, the Soviets, I think Belgium's in there somewhere. So it would be cool to see that for the other factions as well. And then I think this actually could be a huge one, because originally you were going to get 6 to 8 operations on the new factions, but now you're going to get basically a never-ending suite of operations depending on who you want to pick, how long you want to play, your map, your event cards, etc. So it is, however, a big ticket item, which perhaps might see the release of that DLC, which I guess kind of mentions then that it may be part of that DLC pushed to 2024. Here we get a quick look at some French units with some Gazelle helicopters flying over these. Okay, there was an argument about these, whether or not these AMX-10s are tanks. I believe when some of them were sent to Ukraine recently. It's gonna be, I'm not gonna give my answer. I feel like it's going to be very polarizing, but I don't think they're tanks because they're wheeled, right? That's what we're going with. Anyway, moving on to the new mechanics, and this is really talking about the airborne infantry or heliborne infantry. In this case, there are some Black Hawks with airborne infantry. They fly to a destination, they land, and then the helicopters are going to actually automatically retreat along the allegedly safest route, avoiding any known anti-aircraft sites, with the dismounted infantry operating as any other unit would. If this unit is destroyed or retreats the entire stack, you can then recall them back in. This does leave sort of a couple questions. Number one, infantry in this game is going to be slow, so if you deploy these guys pretty far out ahead and you do end up retreating them, it could take a longer time for them to become available again. Furthermore, I'm interested what happens when you shoot the helicopters down, and if there's like a limited pool of helicopters, and if you're out of helicopters for this airborne unit, what happens then? I'm not sure how that's going to work. I just imagine, hey, knocking these helicopters out, is that going to be beneficial for you in the long run or not? And basically, what I mentioned earlier, when I mentioned these F-16s, I'm pretty sure these are potentially the new Fighter Combat Air Patrol, as we can see here, which is going to deploy fighter jets to overwatch a designated area for a specified duration, swooping down to engage any enemy aerial targets, which sounds very familiar to the air sweep tactical aid from World in Conflict. Whether these jets will be visibly there or just kind of there and you just see some missiles coming down, I'm not sure. I'm personally hoping it would be really cool to just see some jets in the air. I feel like Regiments is pretty cool. There's a lot of stuff going on, but it would be nice to just see some jets flying around in the distance and not just come in for one swoop and then, escape off into the distance. And also would give you an actual reason to have anti-air around a lot more often, because there would be a lot more jets just constantly in the air above the area of operation. So it is being said, though, that the functionality of this is still in testing. There needs further refinement and balancing, and specifically with these infantry-only platoons. However, it is said here that it is not going to be tied to any DLC, and what would be really cool is it may appear separately, and I assume this means for free, for existing army. So it's not like, hey, you have to buy the airborne infantry DLC. So that being said, I think that kind of just gives us the early quick look at what we can expect from Regiments between new nations, the demo, as well as the glorious Netherlands, of course, and the airborne infantry. So just a quick look at Regiments. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.